but I actually did. Not once, not because they forgot, because they didn't care enough to know. Whenever someone asked about my work, my mother usually changed the subject before I could answer. She preferred the version of me she had already created, the version that made sense inside her carefully organized world. A world where success looked a certain way. A world where people were measured by titles, appearances, social. A world where I never quite fit by the time Holden announced his engagement to Vivian Whitfield. I had become an expert at staying invisible. Vivian seemed kind enough, only met her twice. Both meetings were brief, both meetings happened under my mother's watchful supervision. Every conversation felt monitored, every word felt evaluated, as if she was waiting for me to somehow ruin everything. The irony was that I didn't even want attention. I wanted peace. I wanted one family event where it wasn't treated like a potential disaster. Apparently, that was too much to ask. The evening of the dinner arrived cold and clear. I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting the sleeve of a navy blue dress. Nothing extravagant. Nothing flashy, simple, professional, forgettable. Exactly the way my mother preferred. I drove downtown alone and arrived 15 minutes early. The event venue looked more like a luxury hotel than a restaurant. Crystal chandeliers glowed overhead. The word followed me all my life. Important schools, important jobs, important families, important opinions. Apparently, love and respect were always reserved for important people. I followed her into the main ballroom. More than 200 guests filled the room. Business executives, community leaders, military officers, extended family members, everyone dressed like they were attending a high-profile quartet played quietly from servers moved gracefully between tables carrying silver trays. The atmosphere felt polished and carefully controlled. Much like my mother, I spotted Holden across the room. His face immediately brightened. Unlike our parents, our brother had never been cruel. He had simply learned to survive by staying silent. There was a difference, Amber. He hugged me. A real hug, warm and genuine. For a moment, I forgot everything else. You came. Of course I came. He smiled. I'm glad. There was something sincere in his voice, something that reminded me of the brother I used to know before adulthood complicated everything. Then Vivian approached. She greeted me warmly. No judgment, no hidden agenda, just kindness. And that alone made me like her. We spent several minutes talking about ordinary things, travel, books, wedding planning, normal conversation. It felt surprisingly refreshing. Maybe tonight wouldn't be so bad after all. Maybe I could survive a few hours and leave quietly. Unfortunately, fate had very different plans. As the evening progressed, guests found their seats. Dinner was served. Speeches began. The spotlight naturally shifted toward Holden and Vivian, exactly where it belonged. I relaxed slightly for the first time all evening. Nobody was watching me. Nobody was analyzing me. Nobody was waiting for me to make a mistake. Then Vivian's father stood up, Colonel Bennett Whitfield, the man my parents practically worshipped, the decorated military officer whose reputation seemed larger than life. The room immediately quieted. Every eye turned toward him. He carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to leadership. His posture was flawless, his voice calm and commanding. The room listened, and he began speaking. Colonel Bennett Whitfield stood at the center of the ballroom, holding a crystal glass in one hand while the room hung on every word he spoke. He began the way everyone expected. He talked about his daughter. He talked about love, commitment, and family. He praised Holden's character and welcomed him into the Whitfield. Family guests smiled. Several people raised their glasses. My mother looked delighted. This was exactly the evening she had envisioned. A flawless gathering, prestigious guests. The perfect future son -in-law. The perfect social moment. Then everything changed. The Colonel's gaze slowly drifted across the room. At first, I didn't think much of it. He was probably looking at relatives, acknowledging guests, maybe searching for someone, but then his eyes stopped directly on me. His expression changed instantly. The smile disappeared. His posture stiffened. Strange look crossed his face. Recognition, the kind that comes from seeing someone you never expected to encounter again for several long seconds. He simply stared. The room noticed. People shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Conversations died. Even the musicians seemed uncertain. The Colonel lowered his glass. Then he stepped away from the podium. Asterisk, one step, then another. Another dot straight toward my table dotted. Not because I suddenly understood. He remembered after all these. He actually around me rapidly. My mother looked horrified. Holden looked puzzled. Vivian looked completely lost. The Colonel stopped directly in front of me. The entire ballroom had gone silent. 200 people watched without understanding what they were. Witnessing, the Colonel studied my face. Not with uncertainty, with confirmation. As though he had finally found something important. Something he wasn't expecting to see. "Excuse me?" he said calmly. His voice carried through the room. "May I ask your name?" A few guests exchanged confused looks. My mother immediately tried to intervene. "This is my daughter, Amber." The Colonel didn't look at her, not even for a second. His attention remained fixed on me. I met his eyes. "Amber Reyes." The moment the words left my mouth, a slow smile appeared on his face. Not amusement, recognition, absolute. Certainty, the Colonel nodded once. Then he said something that changed the entire evening. "Captain Amber Reyes." The room froze. My mother blinked. Holden frowned. Vivian stared at her father. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The Colonel continued, "Forward Operations Command." My heart pounded. He remembered everything. Intelligence, division. The silence deepened. "You coordinated extraction routes during the Eastern Corridor evacuation. A server carrying champagne nearly dropped an entire tray. Several military officers sitting nearby straightened. Immediately now they were paying attention. The Colonel looked around the room. Then he said the word that shattered every assumption my family had ever made about me. "She's the reason 11 of my soldiers returned home alive." The ballroom erupted into whispers. My mother looked like someone had physically struck her. Holden's mouth opened slightly. Vivian stared between her father and me, trying to understand what was happening. The colonel wasn't finished. He addressed the room directly. Most people here probably don't know this. His voice remained calm. Captain Reyes spent years working in higher-risk operations where a single decision could determine whether dozens of people lived or died. Nobody was whispering now. They were listening. Every single person, the colonel continued. I have spent more than 30 years serving beside exceptional men and women. He paused, and Captain Reyes ranks among the most capable professionals I have ever worked with. The room became completely still. I wanted to disappear, not because I was embarrassed, because I never enjoyed attention. I never did those things for recognition. I did them because they needed to be done. The colonel turned toward me. Why didn't you tell anyone? A sad smile touched my lips. Nobody asked. The answer hit harder than I intended. Because it was true. Nobody had asked. Not once. Not my relatives. Not family friends. Not even my own parents. For years. They had preferred assumptions over curiosity, judgment over understanding, labels over truth. Across the room, my mother's face drained of color for the first time in my life. She looked completely lost. The carefully rehearsed social confidence she carried everywhere had vanished. Holden slowly stood from his chair. Amber? His voice cracked slightly. You were a captain? I nodded. The room remained silent. He looked stunned. Not angry, not hurt, just shocked. Why didn't you tell me? I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and I answered honestly. Would it have mattered? The question landed heavily between us, because we both knew the answer. For years, he had watched people underestimate me. He had watched family gatherings where I was dismissed, watched conversations where my opinions were ignored, watched our parents treat me like a disappointment, and he had never stopped it. Not because he was cruel, because silence had become easier. Holden lowered his eyes. The truth hurt. I could see it. Vivian suddenly spoke. You saved soldiers. I smiled softly. It wasn't just me. The colonel immediately shook his head. That's exactly what she always says. Few people laughed quietly. The tension broke slightly. Then the colonel faced the room again. I've met many leaders. His voice strengthened. But true leadership isn't about recognition. He gestured toward me. It's about responsibility. His eyes briefly found my mother. And respect. The message couldn't have been clearer. My mother finally stood. She looked comfortable, vulnerable. almost fragile. I had never seen her that way before. "Amber," she said quietly. The room watched Dot waiting. I didn't know. For years I imagined hearing those words, thought they would feel satisfying, vindicating. Instead, they felt empty, because not knowing had always been a choice. The information was there. The opportunities were there. She simply never looked, never asked, never wanted answers that didn't fit her narrative. You never wanted to know. The statement wasn't angry, just honest. My mother flinched, and that told me everything. The Colonel remained silent. He understood. Several guests understood too, because some truths don't need further explanation. The rest of the evening felt completely different. People approached my table, asked questions, shared. Military officers recognized names and operations. Executives suddenly wanted conversations. Relatives suddenly remembered. I existed. It was fascinating. Nothing about me had changed. Only their perception had. That realization was strangely freeing. Hours later, the event finally ended. Guests began leaving. The ballroom slowly emptied. I slipped toward the coat check area, hoping to leave quietly, but Holden caught up to me first. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he hugged me, harder than before. "I'm sorry." His voice was barely above a whisper. For all of it, closed my eyes. Part of me had waited years to hear that. "I'm still your sister. I know no rank changes that." He then nodded. "I know." For the first time in a very long time, it felt like we were finally speaking honestly, as family. Not roles, not expectations, family. A few minutes later, a mother approached. She looked exhausted, not physically, emotionally, like someone whose entire understanding of a situation had collapsed. "Amber." I turned toward her. She hesitated. Something I had never seen before. Then she quietly said, "I'm proud of you." The words hung in the air. Years too late, but sincere. Finally, sincere. I studied her face, and for the first time, saw regret. Real regret. Not embarrassment, not social concern. Regret. I smiled gently. Not because everything was fixed, because healing sometimes starts with honesty. Nothing more, nothing less. "Good night, Mom." Then I walked outside. Cold night air greeted me immediately. The city lights stretched endlessly before me. For a long moment, simply stood there, breathing, thinking, feeling lighter than I had in years. Not because people finally respected me, not because the Colonel had praised me, not because the room had applauded. I felt lighter because I had stopped carrying the burden of proving myself. The truth had spoken for itself, and for the first time, everyone finally listened. Asterisk, if this story touched your heart, take a moment to subscribe and join our growing community. Stories like Amber's remind us that the people we underestimate often carry the greatest strength. Sometimes the quietest person in the room has fought battles nobody knows about. Sometimes the family member everyone overlooks has accomplished more than anyone realizes. And sometimes respect arrives only after the truth can no longer be ignored. If you've ever felt unseen, misunderstood, or judged by people who never took the time to know the real you, remember this: your worth does not depend on someone else's opinion. Keep moving forward. Keep believing in yourself. One day, the truth about who you are will shine brighter than every label placed upon you. Until then, stay strong, stay kind, and we'll see you in the next story. When my mother called me at 2 o'clock in the morning, I knew it wasn't because of an emergency. My mother didn't call to check if I was okay. She called to give instructions. "Tomorrow night you're coming to dinner with us," she said, without even saying hello. "Your brother's future in-laws will be there. Try not to make things awkward." I sat up in bed, staring into the darkness. For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood her. Then she added something that hurt even more. "Please keep your opinions to yourself for one evening." The line went silent. No greeting, no concern, no apology, just another reminder that in my family, I was still considered the problem. What my mother didn't know was that I had spent years carrying responsibilities that would have broken most people. She didn't know where I had been. She didn't know what I had survived. And she certainly didn't know that the man she was so desperate to impress had once trusted me with the lives of his soldiers. By the end of that dinner, the truth would come out. The same family that spent years treating me like an embarrassment would sit in stunned silence. My brother would discover a secret I had hidden for years. My mother would run out of excuses, and a decorated military colonel would stand in front of 200 guests and reveal exactly who I really was. But before any of that happened, I simply sat there in the dark, holding my phone and listening to the empty silence after the call ended. Because deep down, I already knew tomorrow wasn't going to change my family's opinion of me. At least, that's what I thought. I had no idea that less than 24 hours later, everything they believed about me would collapse in front of an entire room. My name is Embarrass. I'm 31 years old, and this is the night my family finally learned the truth. Growing up was never the daughter my mother wanted. My older brother, Holden, had always been. He earned perfect grades. He followed every rule. He knew exactly how to make our. Meanwhile, I asked questions. I challenged expectations. I chose paths nobody in my family understood. Over time, it became easier for them to label me difficult than to actually listen to me. Eventually, that label became permanent. At family gatherings, I was introduced with polite smiles and cautious warnings. Amber can be unpredictable. Amber does her own thing. Amber never settles down. As though my entire identity could be reduced to a collection of disappointments. The funny thing was that nobody ever asked what I actually did. Not once. Not because they forgot, because they didn't care enough to know. Whenever someone asked about my work, my mother usually changed the subject before I could answer. She preferred the version of me she had already created, the version that made sense inside her carefully organized world. A world where success looked a certain way. A world where people were measured by titles, appearances, social approval. A world where I never quite fit by the time Holden announced his engagement to Vivian Whitfield. I had become an expert at staying invisible. Vivian seemed kind enough. I had only met her twice. Both meetings were brief. Both meetings happened. Under my mother's watchful supervision, every conversation felt monitored. Every word felt evaluated, as if she was waiting for me to somehow ruin everything. The irony was that I didn't even want attention. I wanted peace. I wanted one family event where it wasn't treated like a potential disaster. Apparently, that was too much to ask. The evening of the dinner arrived cold and clear. I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting the sleeve of a navy blue dress. Nothing extravagant. Nothing flashy, simple, professional, forgettable. Exactly. The way my mother preferred. I drove downtown alone and arrived 15 minutes early. The event venue looked more like a luxury hotel than a restaurant. Crystal chandeliers glowed overhead. Large windows overlooked the city skyline. Soft music drifted through the entrance. Every detail screamed money. My mother spotted me the second I walked inside. The expression on her face reminded me of an airport security officer's spottage. She immediately crossed the room. "There you are," she said. She lowered her voice. "Remember what we talked about?" I smiled politely. "Good evening to you too." She ignored the comment. These people are important." I almost laughed. Important. The word followed me all my life. Important schools, important jobs, important families, important opinions. Apparently, love and respect were always reserved for important people. I followed her into the main ballroom. More than 200 guests filled the room. Business executives, community leaders, military officers, extended family members, everyone dressed like they were attending a high-profile gala. The string quartet played quietly from one corner. Servers moved gracefully, carrying silver trays. The atmosphere felt polished and carefully controlled. Much like I spotted Holden across the room. His face immediately brightened. Unlike our parents, our brother had never been cruel. He had simply learned to survive by staying silent. There was a difference, Amber. He hugged me. A real hug, warm and genuine. For a moment, I forgot everything else. "You came." "Of course I came." He smiled. "I'm glad." There was something sincere in his voice. Something that reminded me of the brother I used to know before adulthood complicated everything. Then Vivian approached. She greeted me warmly. No judgment, no hidden agenda, just kindness. And that alone made me like her. We spent several minutes talking about ordinary things, travel, books, wedding planning. Normal conversation. It felt surprisingly refreshing. Maybe tonight wouldn't be so bad after all. Maybe I could survive a few hours and leave quietly. Unfortunately, fate had very different plans. As the evening progressed, guests found their seats. Dinner was served. Speeches began. The spotlight naturally shifted toward Holden and Vivian, exactly where it belonged. I relaxed slightly. For the first time all evening. Nobody was watching me. Nobody was analyzing me. Nobody was waiting for me to make a mistake. Then Vivian's father, Colonel Bennett Whitfield, the man my parents practically worshipped,